with my colleagues who were a decade older, who had a decade more life experience, and we had fallen into archetypes. I was the younger brother, which meant people could elbow in front of me, they could talk over me. Producers maybe didn't take me that seriously, who are story producers. I think they were struggling to figure out what to do with me. And it wasn't until later seasons that I really found my voice, because I was like, oh, hell no. You know what I mean? Not that they were doing it maliciously, but the energy. I was younger and I was also very easy to work with, which means if you asked me to do something and I didn't want to do it, I would make it work. I thought I should just play ball. I didn't know I could say, I'm not comfortable with that. That also comes to like fashion and stuff. If I saw a garment on the rack of wardrobe, I came from theater. You don't question the costume designer. They're designing a costume for the character. I didn't know or think about the clothes I wear on a reality show, because reality was new, would tell the audience who I am and and elements about my personality. I had no idea. So oftentimes for big things like the cover of Entertainment Weekly, I mean, Carson dressed me. He was dressing us at that time. And it was like, I hated it, you know, and I didn't like it, but I didn't have enough confidence at that time or a strong enough sense of self to say, you know, is there something else? I was also not sample size. The guys were wearing things from like, you know, samples from designers, and they often would have to shop for me at like H&M or Century 21, or sometimes find something that was kind of androgynous from the women's collection because I could fit into that. You know, it was like a size 28 waist or whatever I was when I was 23. And finding your voice and learning to take up space was one of the biggest lessons that Carson taught me. Because people look at the show and think, oh, he's a loudmouth, or he's like, Brett. No, he's the kindest, sweetest man who lived in a world that oppressed his voice for so long that he confidently said, you're going to accept me and I'm going to take up space whether you like it or not. And I witnessed him do that. And the audience only saw the positive. I saw behind the scenes pushback, the kind of bias that people would show. And he never backed down from it. You know, he sort of almost forced people to see him. And witnessing that quietly in my early 20s helped me later in life as I grew, because now I can do that in a way that's respectable and that really honors who I am. And I think that's about self-worth, but we get so nervous because I was very much like, I'm so thankful to have a job. I don't want to rock the boat, you know?
I do. Did you really, because look, I imagine you weren't paid, like you were going to go back to Broadway, which you said you make money on Broadway.
Bethany Frankel, shout out to Bethany Frankel, talking on her podcast or on TikTok about how much she made season 1, which I think was like, I think she said $7,500 an episode. Let me tell you something about our $3,000 episode starting rate. And it's 20 years after. So I hope the producers, whoever involved, don't take offense to this. When we did the show, I had already had half a decade of TV, film, whatever work behind me. Not just what I did, but my peers, people who created shows. I had the wealth of knowledge of how the industry worked walking in at 23. I might have looked like a child, but I knew what was what. So I knew it was not a lot of money, but I was working, again, for $400 a week. And I was like, I'll take it. But when the show hit in such a way that we were suddenly on the cover of things, blah, blah, blah. We had these ad sales coming in. Influencers now hold a can of something and they get paid a lot of money to do so. Products that appeared on our show went to the producers and the networks in terms of like the money. We were influencing but did not receive that. We also, in my opinion, with my life that I've done now many shows, we were also producers of our own segments in tandem with the producers, and that was our only negotiating power. So when the show was going to season 2, we tried to negotiate, and they said, you're not producers, you can't. And I said, well, then you tell us what to paint the walls. You tell us what to put the guy in. They came up to, I think it was like $7,000 an episode, and with $500 bumps every year. Now, again, it's 20 years ago. I feel like there's a respectable amount of time to talk money because it's a lesson in queer history and media. And the reason why I say it that way is at that time, and this is important to highlight because it is a part of queer history, every guy except me got 7-figure or high 6-figure endorsement deals. We're talking millions, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Companies or people that were the gatekeepers to companies, agents, managers, producers, often told me that I was not marketable because middle America was not ready for Latin, queer, somewhat femme presenting, some might say at that time. And I remember we were going to take a meeting with the agents that represented the Queer Eye brand. They wanted us to sign at their agency. We were new. I already had agents. None of the boys did. So we meet with them as a courtesy. They sat us down, and this may shock you. They give this beautiful presentation. It's great. Fancy office. I could see all of it. Beautiful. And I'll never forget this because, and this is no hate to anyone, but this informed my life. I think about this with every booking I get. After that initial presentation, each of us got an agent to sit across from. And that agent was there to pitch us why we should be at this agency. So I'm sitting across from this guy and I tell him, hey, I'm an actor and this is what I've done and I'd like to continue that. And I don't want, me being a part of the show, as incredible as this movement is, to distract from what it is I really do, which this show doesn't highlight.
Right.
And he looked at me blankly and he said, I don't know what to tell you. You're not going to be the next Antonio Banderas. And I was saddened that was his only path forward for me, or only person I could look to in terms of like a career in the industry as an actor. As much as I love Antonio, I was like that. So I don't want to be him, but you're saying there's nothing? Okay. So I filed that away, and I was like, but some of the other boys are getting endorsement opportunities. And he's like, what are we going to do? Like, go to Taco Bell? Like, what could we? And when I didn't sign, the person who was sort of brokering the whole situation reached out to me. Why didn't you sign with us? And I explained what the guy had said. And he said, oh, well, he's a junior agent. And I said, that's the problem. You didn't value me enough to put me with a senior agent. You put me with a new junior agent because you didn't think I was of value to your agency. And for that reason, I'm out. And that sounded a little Shark Tank, but that's how I felt.
Yeah.
But every time I book a role, every time I'm having a director's session for a big motion picture or something, I think about those words. They haunt me to this day. I'm 43 years old, and I still carry that man's voice. I remember what he was wearing. I remember what the room was like. It was so profoundly impactful because at that time, there was no one I could tell. No one explicitly thought that was a problem and would come and help. It was just like, yeah, it sucks. Because everyone at that time who was in decision-making positions softly agreed with the sentiment and wasn't willing to be bold and try something new. Carson had a lot of big deals, and that was bold because of the way Carson presents, right? So he got big endorsement things. And, it was like you had to be a Will or Will or Jack, and I didn't fit into that. And so it warms my heart. And I wanted to share that story today because we are in a different place. I think the big thing we can look at right now is Dylan Mulvaney on TikTok doing the whole, I think it's Coors Light ad. And, so many conservative folks are freaking out about this company supporting LGBT. I'm like, have you been to a Pride? Do you know how many straight brands support Pride?
Yeah.
And